Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. And this video is a Q&A. I did one last year and I thought it was really fun and you guys seem to enjoy it, so I'm doing it again. The questions all come from a request that I made on my IG stories, so let's get started. The first question is kind of spicy. Any more Lux YouTube X? Less idea stealing since your last Q&A. I know, messy AF. And then they request to be anonymous. I think I'll keep most of these questions anonymous unless I know the person has a public YouTube or Instagram. So if you don't know what this person is referring to, I will link my last Q&A video where I talk about idea stealing on YouTube, and I will agree with this. I'm not taking any credit. I think it's quite possible that people are naturally on their own without being shamed crediting other creators, but I have noticed that a lot more creators are giving credit to their sources in the last year. Whatever has inspired that change, I think it's great. And as far as luxury YouTube icks, I'll just call them pet peeves because I don't like the word ick. So the first pet peeve that comes to my mind are videos gatekeeping so-called basic luxury items. I have pretty tough skin and I don't really care about people calling something that I own basic. You guys may know I love the Neverfull and it doesn't get more basic than that, so I wear my basic banner proudly. But I'm talking more about the kinds of videos where it seems like the creator is calling items basic, but also seems to be gatekeeping those items at the very same time. I know that sounds contradictory, so I'll explain what I mean. For example, if I have a classic flap and I don't like how common the classic flap has become, this is not the case for me. You guys know how much I love the classic flap. I don't care who has it. I think individual style is all about how you put items together, not about the individual items themselves. So for me, it is completely irrelevant how many people have a particular item. One of the most stylish women I've ever seen, I saw in Bergdorf's wearing a crisp white button-down shirt with impeccably tailored wide-leg trousers, and some would say really basic accessories. She had a GM Neverfull that looked like it was nearing the end of its life, a very old Cartier watch, and a love bracelet that I almost didn't recognize as a love bracelet because it had so many scratches on it that you could barely see the screws anymore. And she was wearing a really old pair of Loro Piano shoes. So individually, you might call many of the items that she was wearing basic, but the way she pulled it all together, the way she carried herself was really elegant. So actually what I find basic is that line of reasoning. But back to my pet peeve would be me trying to gatekeep the classic flap by convincing you that it's basic and you don't want one. So let's say I said, I've had my classic flap for 13 years. Everyone has one now. It's so basic. Definitely don't buy one. Am I gonna sell mine? No. Even though because I've had it for 13 years, even in this crappy resale market, I'll still make money if I sold it. Am I gonna keep wearing mine? Of course, but you should definitely not buy one. I don't know about you guys, but for me, there does seem to be an element of gatekeeping in those kinds of videos. And let me be clear about a couple of things. That may not be at all the creator's intention. I'm just explaining how I interpret it and why I find it annoying. The sole catalyst for these videos may just be to be informative and helpful. And secondly, I'm not talking about someone who's simply giving a strong opinion about something they don't like. In fact, I appreciate a strong opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I don't like the classic flap, it's not for me, I'm never gonna buy one, or I've had one, been there, done that, sold it. Or even someone criticizing the pricing of these bags because Lord knows I can't think of one luxury bag on the market right now that isn't overpriced. So hopefully you can see the distinction that I'm trying to make. I'm not sure I'm doing a great job of explaining why I find a gatekeeping element to those videos, but let me know if you know what I mean, or am I reaching? This is so random, but what comes to mind when I think of this, and maybe this example can help illustrate my point, but I have a friend who's an attorney but was a stay-at-home mom for a few years when her children were really young, and her one guilty pleasure was eating these very obscure, expensive European snacks that she got from some little market on the Upper East Side. They didn't have a lot of stock, so she couldn't buy a bunch and stockpile her favorites. And it would drive her absolutely crazy that every time she opened one of these snacks, her husband or her kids would immediately come over and want to try and eat. She'd be left with very little and she couldn't really enjoy them. Just too many people were in her snacks, and that was her thing. She wanted it just for herself, and if she wanted to share it with them, that's fine. fine, but it really irked her that she couldn't have this thing that she had discovered and gave her a little bit of joy. So for a while there, she had taken to every time she opened a new type of snack, she would complain about the taste or the texture, and so her husband and kids weren't interested. Eventually her husband caught on, but she also told me that she would never tell people about this market because she did not want anyone to go there and buy her snacks. That's such a random example, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what I'm talking about. The next question is from one of my friends on IG. She asks, if you had a choice of any Hermes blue box bag, which would you choose? So that's pretty easy for me because although I find many of the blue box bags pretty, I'm not really interested in owning any of them. And for this, I'm only talking about bags that I've seen in person because lots of things can look cute in a picture or a video. But I've seen the Picnic Birkin and Kelly in various sizes. Not for me. The Shadow Birkin, the Shadow Clutch, are those blue box bags? In any case, not interested. I've seen the Dessod, the Studded Mini Kelly, and Constance. So I feel like I've seen a lot of the blue box bags in person, but I'll say the only one that I was legitimately tempted by was the Rock Birkin. So it's a Birkin 25. I think the leather is volupto with a ton of palladium hardware. Black and palladium bags are probably my all-time favorite combination. It's super edgy. So this bag is right up my alley, and I didn't really think that much about it until I saw it in person, and it is a showstopper. So why haven't I put it on my sort of lifetime holy grail wish list? Would I really choose this bag over my regular black Birkin with palladium hardware to run around the city with? I take my bags on the subway. I'm not really precious with Birkins. I know that as much as I love the look of this bag, I'm not sure that I would use it in the way that I use my Hermes bags, especially my Birkins, in a very super casual way. Sweatpants and Birkins are one of my favorite combos, so I don't realistically see this bag ever getting any use, although I do consider myself a collector of Hermes bags, and I see nothing wrong with having certain bags just for collector purposes, but I would find it very hard to spend this much money for something that I know going into it would just be a collector's piece. Well, I don't even know the price of this, but I'm going to assume it's very expensive. So although the look of this bag is very casual, I'm guessing it has a very formal price tag, and that would prohibit me from using and enjoying it the way that I do my other bags. The next question is from another one of my IG friends, Kim. She has a YouTube channel. I'll link it below. Give her a follow. We have very similar taste. So Kim says that she has an IG friend that got all of her bags stolen. Oh my goodness. Asked her HSA if she could get a bag, and the SA said no bags. It happens a lot. Wait, what happens a lot? People asking for bags or bags being stolen? I'm gonna guess bags being stolen, although both are true. Can't help you out. Relationship for several years, fair, unfair. And Kim adds that she personally thinks no is fine, but the SA should have been a little gentler in the delivery. Wow, I really feel for your friend, Kim. Such a nightmare. Forget about the bags for a minute. Robberies can be very traumatic experiences. I hope your friend was not home at the time, but assuming that your friend is okay, the robbery situation aside, but the fact that this was your friend's SA for a number of years is what makes this particularly disappointing. I know if this was my SA, even if she didn't have a bag to give me, she would be so empathic and consolatory. I've been waiting for another Kelly 25 for over 2 years now, so my SA tells me no all the time. That's not the point, so I totally agree that it's not the no that's the problem. It's that if I'm reading this right, it sounds like the SA responded in a very callous and uncaring way. I will say, in a very delicate situation like this, it really is all about the delivery, so that same thing can be said in very different ways. For example, if the SA said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. Robberies are happening a lot now, but unfortunately I don't have any bags to offer you," versus, "Sorry that happened to you, but robberies happen a lot and I don't have any bags to offer you." Those are almost identical statements, but they convey something very different. And if the latter was the way that my SA said that to me, that would be the absolute end of our relationship, and I would just have to find another SA. I'm very curious to know what happened with your friend in this SA. Are they still working together? I'm guessing no, but you never know. Assuming that the SA was not nice about the delivery of this statement, tell me what you guys think. How would you have handled it? The next question is from my girl Kagem, who's also on YouTube. Her channel is Haya Glamazon. I'll link it below. She's super funny. Definitely go give her a follow. Her question is, do you plan on not being anonymous eventually. What do you think of the row? Seems like a snooze to me. Well, let's start with the row. I cannot think of a brand, maybe Laura Piana, that is less your style, Kagem. So I am not at all surprised that the row bores you. As for me, I really like the row. It's very much up my alley. I don't really know about the accessories in terms of quality. I like the look of the Margot. I wouldn't buy one because I know myself and I would always choose a Birkin over the Margot, so there's no point in me buying it, but the aesthetic of the bag I really love. But I enjoy the row clothes. It's so interesting to me that they've become so popular in the last couple of years. I haven't bought anything from them recently since before the pandemic. I really like their tailored trousers, their shirts, all of which I've gotten at sample sales. I don't know if they still do them, but they used to have really good sample sales. I like the way that they cut clothes, crisp, clean lines, no frills, great quality materials. And just from an overall style perspective, the street style of Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen are very much how I dress in general. I think I'm almost exactly the same height as them. So on any given day, you can find me walking down the streets of New York in all black with a giant bag and oversized sunglasses. So that brand is very much up my alley, but still wouldn't buy it full price, and I haven't shopped there in quite some time. As far as whether or not I won't be anonymous eventually, I have thought about this seriously a couple of times. I started making YouTube videos a long time ago, but I'd say I only really started to put out semi-consistent videos in 2020 just because I had more time. And initially when I started my YouTube channel, I wanted anonymity for professional reasons, but by the time I started putting out more consistent content a few years ago, being anonymous was no longer for professional reasons. It was more about security. I remember two very distinct times when I considered going public, if you will, and both times something really bizarre happened. The first time, I remember thinking, I'm not really concerned about the professional aspect anymore. Lots of my colleagues have very public social media, mostly related to what we do for a living, but still very public, and they've all seen me with my bags at work. I don't often take Birkins and Kellys, but I have taken them to work, so no one would be surprised by this channel, and honestly, I just stopped caring about that. So when I was seriously considering not being anonymous anymore, the concern was more about safety, and I remember this very clearly because it was so bizarre. I had this very distinct thought about, I'm sure people that put luxury on social media get robbed or burgled, but I couldn't think of one person that I follow who has been robbed. So what are the chances really? So I was thinking back and forth about it, the pros and the cons, because let's face it, it's much more difficult to connect with an audience and grow with an anonymous channel. So the dilemma that I was having is that I'm not super concerned about channel growth, but it is nice, and doing YouTube is a lot of work. So that's one very tangible way where you can see your efforts being rewarded other than monetarily, and I'll save the monetary aspect for the next question, but it was mostly the connection with viewers that I was thinking about. So in any case, I had that thought, what are the odds of someone getting robbed specifically related to social media? I put the thought out of my head, and then not even 15 minutes later, I decided to watch some YouTube, and the very first video that was in my recommended was the one where the YouTuber Tamara got robbed. It was so bizarre because it wasn't like I'd been pondering this thought for weeks or months and then later this video popped up. I had not been thinking about it at all, then had that thought, and then 15 minutes later I was watching this robbery video. So I put it aside and decided I needed to give it much more thought because I could always decide to not be anonymous, but once you lose your anonymity, you can never get it back. So sometime later, probably a year, maybe more passed, and I was thinking about it again, and I was really justifying not being anonymous. Tamara's a really big influencer. She has hundreds of thousands of followers. The chances of that happening to a very tiny channel like mine are probably very slim, and so I was seriously considering it again, decided to sleep on it, woke up, and one of the first few videos that were recommended to me that day was a video from a YouTuber named Ashley. I don't remember his channel name, but he made a video about being robbed. But unlike Tamara, who hadn't really explicitly stated that her robbery was connected to social media at all, this guy was very upfront that he thought his robbery was connected to his presence on social media. But what really struck me is that his robbery negated all of my justifications about these kinds of robberies not really happening to people with smaller social media platforms. Not that he had a tiny channel like mine, but certainly a lot smaller than Tamara's. And that was all the confirmation I needed to remain anonymous. And I can hear so many of you through the screen saying, and I'm saying too, that these are purely coincidences. I myself have a very scientific, empirical mind. However, the other part of me was raised Catholic and spent every Sunday for many years in school with nuns who seemed to find signs in just about everything. And so I will admit there was a part of me that saw this as a sign. Going public was not something that I thought about regularly. I had two very distinct thoughts about it, and both times someone from social media got robbed. My logical mind tells me that people get robbed every day, so I'm not ruling out the possibility of not being anonymous in the future, but for right now, I think I'm good. I have a couple of finance related questions. The first is, do you buy bags with your YouTube money? The answer is no, for a couple of reasons. The first is YouTube, meaning purely AdSense, just doesn't pay enough to buy the kinds of bags that I like. And the second reason is, even though my channel is monetized, I've never actually had the money transferred out of my AdSense account into my bank account, which means I have never received money for making YouTube videos, which you might find shocking. I don't have any sort of noble reason for that. It's simply because it's not enough money to really make a difference in my life, and I don't want it messing with my taxes, because in the US, in order to get the money, you have to give Google AdSense your tax information, and I just don't want to, because you always risk the possibility that even a small amount of money can push you over a marker, and then all of your income gets taxed at a higher tax rate. So it's just not worth it to me. I'm not sure how long Google will let me not take my money. I'm assuming they'll force me to at some point, but for now it's just sitting there almost like a savings account, and I'm sure I'll have to take it one day, in which case I'll buy something really nice for myself. Next is, how do you plan your budget when buying luxury? Which I think is a reasonable question given how expensive these items are. It's also a very different question from how do you afford luxury, because there's really only one answer. So I'm gonna do my best not to give a very superficial, trite answer to this. Make sure all my bills are paid and whatever's left over is used for luxury, which is true, but I get that when people are asking this question, they're looking for a little bit more than that. And I think that's particularly true for me because I've been quite upfront and honest about the fact that I do have a very strict budget. How I come up with that budget on an annual basis is that I have certain markers and percentages that I need to hit. So I'm at the point now where I save and or invest more than 50% of my income. It also helps that I don't have a mortgage. Not that I'm saying anyone with a mortgage should not be buying luxury, just telling you the way that my brain functions. If I still had a mortgage and I bought a Birkin, I would be thinking about it as one or two payments that could be made to pay off my mortgage sooner. So I'm not the kind of person that can really enjoy luxury when I have debt, which I think stems from 13 years ago when I bought my classic flaps. Although I'm really glad now that I bought them, back then there was some guilt associated. So I'm not counting. I do own my investment/rental properties that do have a mortgage, because those properties pay for themselves and there are tax benefits to having a mortgage, but that is way too detailed. You didn't ask me for all of that. Back to the budget. So I plan to save or invest more than 50% of my income. Then there are my monthly living expenses, which even though I don't have a mortgage are still pretty high because I live in New York City. Anyone who lives in New York City and owns a co-op will tell you that maintenance charges on a co-op, which is kind of like HOA fees for Americans outside of New York City, can be just as much as some people's mortgages. I used to have charitable contributions as automatic payments, but I got burned by doing that because one of the charities turned out to be corrupt. So now I just give direct payments, but that has to be factored in. Then I plan for trips, which I don't travel as much as I'd like to travel just because of school schedules, but travel also gets factored in. I won't go into this, but as we all know, know having kids is expensive, and of course we have to factor in all of those associated costs. And then I also have a rough estimate of the amount of money that I usually spend on entertainment. So Broadway shows, the ballet, opera, concerts, all of the things that I like to do, and are just a few of the reasons that I enjoy living in this ridiculously expensive city, and also where I get to use all of my beautiful bags. So I keep all of that in mind. At the beginning of the year, I overestimate everything, and so after all of that, I usually have a little bit of money left, and that is my luxury budget. So when you hear me say I can only buy one piece of fine jewelry, maybe a couple of pieces of ready-to-wear, one bag per year, two on a good year, besides not wanting to overwhelm myself with too much stuff, that's why, because I have a pretty strict budget. So of course I could move things around and save and invest a lot less, but if I did that, I don't think that I could enjoy the things that I buy as much. So that was a fairly detailed answer to your question. The next question is, I'm surprised that you didn't make an Hermes lawsuit video. Thoughts? So you're absolutely right. I didn't make an Hermes lawsuit video because that was a time-sensitive topic, and if you're anything like me in regards to hot topics, I tend to watch the first few videos about a hot topic and maybe a couple more if I really like the creator and value their opinion. But after that, I'm kind of over it. So although I had a lot to say about the topic, I didn't bother to make the video because I just felt that ship had sailed. But I'm so glad that you asked this question, because earlier in the year, I filmed my annual Hermes conspiracy theories video, but I didn't bother to edit and post it because I felt that so many of my theories were inadvertently related to the lawsuit. And because I didn't make a video about the lawsuit, giving my opinions and sharing my biases, that video just didn't make much sense. So I think that it's really good that I'm sharing my thoughts about the lawsuit in this video, so that maybe I will go ahead and edit that conspiracy theories video and share it with you before the end of the year. Firstly, I want to say that I think that these are grown-ups who admittedly, according to this lawsuit, engaged in thousands of dollars of pre-spending in order to try to get a bag. And one of the plaintiffs successfully got a bag. The issue was that the second bag didn't come fast enough. So to me, it sounds like you were gambling. The game was all well and good when you were winning, but you were unwilling to take any L's. And let me make a bit of a disclaimer here. I think it's important that you know how I feel about the pre-spend in general. I think the purpose of the pre-spend is multifold. It increases revenue, obviously. Most businesses have some means of incentivizing their customers to spend more. And secondly, it de-incentivizes people reselling their brand new box fresh bags, because if you've spent all that money to get the bag, even if you're able to resell for double the price, you won't make any kind of profit. And lastly, it will allow the company as a whole to not be so reliant on a single métier. It will be the kiss of death for Hermes as a brand if they're overly reliant on leather goods to be profitable. So I totally get the concept of the pre-spend, but you also know that I've never spent one-to-one to get a bag. And let me just clarify this. That's not a flex, it's just a fact. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is that despite me understanding the rationale of the brand, for me as a consumer, it's just not something that I'm willing to do. And honestly, I think it will take away the enjoyment that I get from any one particular bag, because then I'm no longer carrying a $10,000 bag. If I've done a 2-to-1 pre-spend, I'm now carrying a $30,000 bag, which wouldn't sit right with me. It doesn't mean that I don't buy from Hermes. I love Hermes stuff. I've bought ready to wear at the sale. I've bought ready to wear at the airport, which means I really love Hermes ready to wear, because if you're aware of how Hermes works, that will not in any way help you get a bag. And the second reason is purely financial. I know some people are unwilling to do the pre-spend because they really only want the bags at Hermes, that they don't want any of the other crap. That is certainly not the case for me. I love the other métiers at Hermes, and I don't think of it as crap at all. In fact, I think when I'm done with buying bags, so I have that extra money that I would have spent on bags, that means I'll have more money to spend on their other departments. So I definitely don't have the problem of not wanting the other things. I think I can go into Hermes tomorrow and find $100,000 worth of stuff that I would want. So definitely not my issue. But what is my issue is that I have a budget, and a pretty strict budget, which means I can't buy all the things that I would like. So hopefully that clears up why I've never done the one-to-one pre-spend, which ultimately means that I have to rely on my working relationship with my SA. I have to wait longer for bags and be prepared for the possibility that I may not be offered any bags, which I'm okay with. So I think we're all adults. Hermes isn't being marketed to impressionable children who are incapable of understanding what they're doing. And I've heard the arguments that the behavior of these SAs are greedy and excessive. It used to be that you only had to spend a couple of $1,000s to get a bag, which was reasonable. Now people are spending upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 pre-spend to get one bag. For me, that argument is flawed. Whether it's $3,000 or $30,000, $3,000 to you may be $30,000 to someone else. It's all relative. Either you're okay with a pre-spend or you're not. And I don't think that any SA can manipulate someone that isn't allowing themselves to be manipulated. And I absolutely believe that there are SAs out there that will try to get every ounce of pre-spend out of you that you are willing to give. Now, I imagine at this point, many of you are saying none of that matters because if it's tying and it breaks antitrust laws, then it's illegal. And to that, I will say, firstly, I agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, it doesn't matter if the pre-spend is reasonable to you or not. Whether it's $3,000 or $30,000, if we're going to argue that it's illegal, then it doesn't matter the dollar amount. But moreover, all I will say about the legalities are that if you live in the US, you will know how litigious of a society this is. People sue for everything. And it is just my personal belief that these antitrust laws were put in place to protect consumers from companies monopolizing industries that could potentially be harmful and impact our daily functioning. Imagine how detrimental it would be if there were monopolies on daily living necessities like medication and food. However, I do think that creative lawyering can manipulate laws intended to protect us and be utilized for the greater good of society are applied to scenarios that I don't think that our lawmakers would ever have foreseen. If I were a betting woman, I'd say that no one was thinking about handbags in relation to the specific issue around tying. That happens all the time in the US. Well-meaning laws are used to bring forth lawsuit after lawsuit. Now, I'm not even going to get into whether these people have a case or not. I know most people who have made these lawsuit videos have said that they don't think that these plaintiffs have a leg to stand on. They're probably right, but what I will say is that I have been so surprised in the past with the results of some legal cases. For me, a hallmark of these kinds of lawsuits is a very famous case in the US in the 90s where this woman sued McDonald's because she said her coffee was too hot and she got burned. And there was a public outcry about how ridiculous this lawsuit was. I think many people thought she didn't have a leg to stand on because she decided to open up this hot cup of coffee in her car between her legs, spilled the coffee, and got seriously injured. McDonald's refused to settle because, honestly, why would they? She was clearly at fault. So I think a lot of people at the time probably thought this suit would have been thrown out. And lo and behold, this woman won the lawsuit and she got a judgment for millions of dollars, even though it went to a jury trial and the jury recognized that she was partly at fault here. But they were able to compare the negligence of McDonald's versus the negligence of the plaintiff. And because they found that McDonald's was partly negligent, even though they agreed that this woman was clearly negligent as well, she got awarded millions. So my point in telling you that story is that laws in the US are used all the time to justify and bring forth many different lawsuits. And some of them, to everyone's surprise and dismay, are successful. So I know after that McDonald's lawsuit, so many people in the US brought frivolous lawsuits for hot coffee and they were unsuccessful, but it only took that one. So all of this to say that my my overall opinion is that I think, especially in America, personal responsibility often gets lost. For children as well as adults, it's now expected that if you're a kid and you participate in competitive activities in some areas now, everyone gets a participation medal, so no one's feelings gets hurt. Personal responsibility is becoming a thing of the past. Frustration tolerance to being told no is at an all-time low. And I agree with everyone that a huge part of the appeal of the Birkin is its elusiveness. There are very few things in our consumeristic society that you can't have immediately in the exact way that you want it if you have enough money, that aren't subject to instant gratification. And many people enjoy the slow pace of Hermes and having to work towards something that they want. And I do think that a lot of the appeal of these bags will go away if that is taken away. Hermes will always maintain its appeal for clients that were around before the craze, but I very much think that Hermes has attracted many people in recent years because of that elusive appeal. So my overall thoughts about the lawsuit is that I don't think it's credible and I think it should be dismissed. That being said, I would not be at all surprised if Hermes settled or these plaintiffs actually won. I also think that private companies, as long as they are not discriminating against protected classes or are monopolizing essential goods and services, should be allowed to incentivize sales. And that's not to say that you have to agree with their sales tactics. There are plenty of stores that I don't go to because I don't enjoy how they sell, whether it's pushiness or too much upselling. So we as the consumer have a lot more power than we think, whether it's Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Ferrari, or Hermes. We're wading into perilous waters when we start telling private brands that they have to sell their most prized products to anyone who requests them. And I think anyone who does not want to engage in a pre-spend should not engage in a pre-spend. End of. So let me know what you think of my take on the Hermes lawsuit. I think I'm gonna stop here, even though I have a few more questions because I've already talked for more than 2 hours and I need to edit this down, but I will be doing more Q&As in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel. That would make my day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.